the air in the grand ballroom, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition, crackled with energy. On stage, Julian Vance, a titan of industry, was celebrating his crowning achievement. But it wasn't the skyscraper he was unveiling that held the city captive. It was the woman whose arm he held her fingers intertwined with his. Her name was Isabella, his brilliant protégée, and her triumphant smile was a dagger in the heart of a silent watcher. But the real story wasn't on the stage. It was about to walk through the ballroom doors holding an object of myth and power, a family seal that could build empires or, on a night like this, burn one to the ground. Elara Vance believed in structure. As one of New York's most sought-after architects, she understood that the most beautiful facades often concealed the most complex and sometimes compromised foundations. Her own life was a testament to this principle. To the outside world, she was the elegant, intelligent wife of Julian Vance, the visionary CEO of Vance Holdings. Their life was a blueprint of success, a sprawling Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park. Two bright children, Liam and Sophia, at an elite private school, and a philanthropic presence that made them the darlings of the city's upper crust. Their marriage, once a passionate joint venture, had slowly been renovated into a polite, functional partnership. The late-night conversations about art and ambition had been replaced by shared calendars and brief logistical check-ins. Julian, once her confidant, had become a man she admired from a distance, a brilliant comet streaking across the business world. He was consumed by his latest project, the Meridian Tower, a gleaming, audacious skyscraper that would forever alter the New York skyline. It was his legacy, he said. Their legacy. But Elara saw the hairline fractures. They appeared in the form of late nights he claimed were spent at the office, but his shoes were oddly clean for a man supposedly visiting a construction site. They were in the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, the scent of a perfume not her own lingering faintly on his jacket. He was a master builder, but he had grown careless in constructing his lies. The name that haunted these fractures was Isabella Rossi. Young, fiercely intelligent, and ravenously ambitious. Isabella was Julian's head of global strategy. He had discovered her, mentored her, and now it seemed he adored her. Elara had watched them together at company functions. She saw the way Isabella looked at him, a mixture of hero worship and proprietary hunger. She saw the way Julian's eyes would soften, a warmth reserved only for Isabella, now a warmth Elara herself hadn't felt in years. Elara was not a fool. She didn't confront him. A public scene was not her style. It was messy, unstructured, and would achieve nothing but her own humiliation. Instead, she began her own quiet project of emotional excavation. While Julian was building his monument of glass and steel, Elara was uncovering the decaying framework of their marriage. She did it with the same meticulous precision she applied to her architectural designs. She noted dates, times, and discrepancies. She spoke to her lawyer, a discreet man named Marcus Thorne, under the guise of estate planning. The true foundation of their union wasn't love, not anymore. It was the Vance legacy. The Vance family wasn't just wealthy. They were a dynasty built over a century. And at the heart of that dynasty was a tangible piece of its history, the Vance family seal. It was not a mere trinket. It was a hefty, ornate signet made of gold and lapis lazuli, bearing the family crest, a lone wolf staring at a northern star. For generations it had been passed down, but its significance was more than ceremonial. Julian's great-grandfather, a shrewd and distrustful patriarch, had woven its power into the very legal DNA of the company. A clause buried deep within the bylaws of Vance Holdings stipulated that the holder of the seal, traditionally the spouse of the CEO, the guardian of the family's heart, had the deciding vote in any emergency meeting concerning the removal of the chairman of the board. It was a relic of a bygone era, a moral emergency clause designed to protect the company from a leader who brought disgrace upon the family name. Julian, in his modern arrogance, had dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. "It's a beautiful piece of history, darling," he'd told Elara on their wedding day as he placed the heavy velvet-lined box in her hands. "A symbol of you being the soul of this family." Elara, however, had read the bylaws. She understood its true purpose. It wasn't a symbol of the soul. It was a weapon for the mind. For the past year, as Julian's affair with Isabella became an open secret, whispered at dinner parties, she wasn't invited to the seal had sat in a safe in her private study. She would often take it out, the cold, heavy gold, a stark contrast to the hollow ache in her chest. She wasn't just a wife. She was a custodian, and she was beginning to understand that some structures were not meant to be saved, but to be demolished to make way for something stronger. The invitation to the Meridian Tower Gala arrived on a crisp October morning. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the ink a shimmering gold. It was a celebration of Julian's triumph. Elara looked at it, her reflection faintly visible in the glossy finish. She knew Isabella would be there, not as a guest, but as a queen in waiting. And she knew, with the chilling certainty of a perfect calculation, that this was the night the foundation would finally give way. She went to her study, opened the safe, and took out the box. The time for silent observation was over. It was time for a new design. The weeks leading up to the gala were a masterclass in deception. Julian was effusively attentive, a man trying to shore up a crumbling wall with a fresh coat of paint. He brought her flowers, praised her latest design award, and spoke animatedly about how the gala would be a night for them, a testament to their partnership. "You are my foundation, Elara," he said one evening, his hand covering hers across the vast expanse of their mahogany dining table. His touch felt foreign, a trespass. "None of this," he gestured vaguely at the opulent room, the tower, the company. "None of it would be stable without you." Elara smiled, a placid architectural curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Julian." She had learned to speak his language, a dialect of half-truths and grand pronouncements. Inside, she was a whirlwind of cold fury and methodical planning. Her days were a study in duality. In the mornings, she was Elara Vance, mother and wife, discussing school projects with Liam and Sophia, approving menus with the household staff. In the afternoons, she became a forensic accountant of her own life. With Marcus Thorne's guidance, she delved into the corporate structure of Vance Holdings. She traced Julian's spending, noting the lavish business expenses at five-star hotels where no conferences were held, the jewelry purchases from Cartier, that she never received the lease on a private apartment in Soho under a subsidiary's name. The apartment was Isabella's. Elara knew it instinctively. She hired a discreet private investigator, a former detective named David Chen, a man who specialized in the quiet implosions of the wealthy. He didn't provide salacious photos. Elara had no need for them. She needed data, financial entanglements, proof of recklessness that went beyond infidelity and crossed into corporate malfeasance. Chen's report was delivered in a plain manila envelope. It was worse than she had imagined. Julian hadn't just bought Isabella gifts. He had made her a partner in a shell corporation, diverting company funds to purchase art for the Meridian Tower's lobby art that was wildly overvalued and sourced from a gallery co-owned by Isabella's cousin. He had fast-tracked her for stock options, far exceeding her role, citing performance metrics that were clearly fabricated. He wasn't just having an affair. He was compromising the company. He was putting their children's legacy at risk for his infatuation. The report was the final piece of her blueprint. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a structural failure that threatened the entire Vance empire. Her resolve hardened from a shield into a sword. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about protecting her family and a 100-year-old legacy from the man who was supposed to be its guardian. The night before the gala, Julian came home late. He smelled of wine and Isabella's signature Chanel No. 5. He found Elara in her study, sketching at her drafting table. The box containing the Vance seal sat on the corner of the desk, closed. "Working late?" he asked, trying for a casual tone. "Just finalizing a design," she replied, her voice calm, her hand steady as she drew a perfectly straight line. "Sometimes you have to see the whole structure before you can be sure of the details." He came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. His touch was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a weight. "Tomorrow night, the whole world will see what we've built." Elara paused her sketching. She looked at the intricate design on the paper, a complex facade for a new museum. "Yes," she said softly. Her eyes focused on the lines. "They will." He kissed the top of her head and left oblivious. He saw a wife, a partner, an accessory to his success. He did not see the strategist who had already mapped his downfall. Alone, Elara opened the box. The gold of the wolf and the deep blue of the lapis lazuli seemed to absorb the light in the room. It felt heavier than ever, not with the weight of the past, but with the gravity of the future. She closed the lid with a soft, final click. The Meridian Tower Gala was the heart of the city that night. The venue was a custom-built pavilion at the base of the tower itself, a cathedral of glass and light, offering the assembled guests a breathtaking view of Julian's creation as it speared the night sky. Limousines deposited figures of immense wealth and influence onto a red carpet, swarming with photographers. The air hummed with the electric buzz of power, a symphony of hushed, deal-making air kisses, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Elara had chosen her attire with the precision of a general selecting armor. She wore a bespoke gown by a minimalist designer, a column of deep emerald silk that was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. It was not a dress that sought to entice. It was a dress that declared its presence. Her dark hair was swept back in a chignon, showcasing a pair of diamond earrings, a Vance heirloom from Julian's grandmother. They were her only concession to the role of the CEO's wife. She arrived deliberately late and alone. Her driver, a man who had been with the family for 20 years, simply nodded as he opened her door, his expression one of quiet loyalty. Her entrance caused a ripple of whispers. The society columns had been speculating for months about the state of the Vance marriage. Her solitary arrival was a statement. Julian, holding court near the stage, saw her immediately. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly masked by a brilliant smile as he excused himself and strode towards her. "Darling, you're here. You look magnificent," he said, kissing her cheek. The gesture was for the cameras, a piece of public theatre. "I was getting worried." "There was no need to worry, Julian. I wouldn't miss your big night," she replied, her voice cool and even. She allowed him to take her arm and lead her into the throng, playing her part. She endured the parade of pleasantries. The mayor, the governor rival developers who clapped Julian on the back with envy-laced congratulations. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Isabella Rossi, circling them like a shark. Isabella was a vision in crimson, a stark, passionate contrast to Ilara's cool emerald. She was never far from Julian's side, interjecting with a brilliant strategic point, laughing at his jokes with an intimacy that was brazen. She was marking her territory. Several times Ilara saw them exchange glances over the heads of the crowd, glances that were conspiratorial, possessive and utterly dismissive of her own presence. They were so confident in their private world that they had forgotten it existed within a larger one she still commanded. An old family friend, a formidable matriarch named Beatrice Fairchild, squeezed Ilara's arm. "You have the patience of a saint, my dear," she murmured, her sharp eyes flicking towards Isabella. Ilara gave a small, enigmatic smile. "Patience is a strategic asset, Beatrice." The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the formal presentation. A hush fell over the crowd as a slickly produced video played showcasing the tower's construction in a dramatic time-lapse set to a soaring orchestral score. It was a monument to Julian's ego, and the crowd loved it. Finally, Julian took the stage to a thunderous ovation. He was a master showman, radiating charm and power. He spoke of vision, of legacy, of building the future. Ilara watched from a front-row table, her expression unreadable, a marble sculpture amidst a sea of adoring faces. A project of this magnitude is never the work of one man. Julian boomed, his voice resonating with practiced humility. It takes a team of brilliant, dedicated people. And there is one person whose strategic vision, whose relentless drive has been the true engine behind the Meridian. She is not just my head of strategy. She is my partner in shaping the future of this company. A knot tightened in Ilara's stomach. She knew what was coming. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the incomparable Isabella Rossi. The applause was polite, but tinged with confusion as Isabella ascended the stage. She walked not to the secondary podium, but directly to Julian's side. He beamed, his face alight with an unguarded adoration that he hadn't shown Ilara in a decade. In a gesture that shattered every remaining shard of public decorum, he took her hand, raised it to his lips for a brief kiss, and then held it firmly, turning to face the audience with her. For a moment, there was only the sound of 1,000 camera shutters firing in rapid succession. The flashes were like lightning, illuminating the tableau on stage, the triumphant man, the radiant mistress, and the unspoken declaration of a new reign. It was a coup executed in the brightest of spotlights. Isabella, glowing with victory, leaned into the microphone. "Julian is too modest," she began, her voice smooth as velvet. His vision wasn't just about building a tower. It was about building a new kind of legacy, one unburdened by the past and focused solely on the future. I am honored to be a part of his future. The subtext was a sledgehammer, unburdened by the past. She was talking about Ilara. Down at the front table, time seemed to slow for Ilara. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes darting between her and the stage. They were looking for the reaction. They expected tears, a hasty, humiliated exit. They expected the woman scorned. The air grew thick with a collective, voyeuristic pity. The whispers started quiet at first, then growing into a low, pervasive hum of scandal. "Did you see that? Right in front of his wife. How could he?" She's pure class. This is career suicide. Elara did not move. She kept her chin straight, her gaze fixed on the stage. She watched as Julian put his arm around Isabella's waist, a gesture of ownership and pride. He was so blinded by his own brilliance, so insulated by his success, that he believed he was untouchable. He believed he could rewrite the rules, not just of real estate, but of honor, of family, of loyalty. He had forgotten that foundations, even those of glass and steel, rely on principles far older than any modern blueprint. She felt nothing. The pain, the rage, the grief. She had processed those emotions in the silent solitude of her study over the past year. What remained was a cold, clear purpose. This public humiliation was not her defeat. It was his. He had just handed her the very thing she needed, a public, undeniable act of disgrace. He had invoked the spirit, if not the letter, of the moral emergency clause. On stage, Julian raised their joined hands. "To the meridian," he shouted. "To the future," Isabella echoed. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain. The celebratory mood had evaporated, replaced by the thrilling, uncomfortable tension of a public immolation. Julian and Isabella seemed oblivious, lost in their shared moment of triumph, a two-person kingdom on a brightly lit stage. Elara waited for the applause to die down. She picked up her evening bag from the table. It was a simple, elegant clutch, but it felt as heavy as a briefcase. Inside, nestled in silk lining, was the Vance family seal. She stood up. Her movement was unhurried, graceful, and it captured the attention of everyone nearby. The whispers ceased. One by one, heads turned in her direction. A path began to clear for her, as if by an invisible force. The city's most powerful people parted before her. Her heels made a soft, rhythmic click on the polished marble floor, the only sound in a suddenly cavernous silence. She was not walking away. She was walking towards the stage. Every eye in the room was on Elara as she approached the stage. The spotlights meant for Julian and Isabella seemed to find her tracing her deliberate, inexorable path. On stage, Julian's triumphant smile faltered. He saw her coming, saw the unnerving calm in her eyes, and a flicker of unease, then alarm, crossed his face. Isabella's grip on his arm tightened, her victorious expression hardening into one of defiant possession. Elara didn't look at the audience. Her gaze was locked on her husband. She reached the short set of stairs at the side of the stage and ascended them with the same measured grace. When she reached the podium, she stood not beside Julian, but directly in front of him, creating a triangle of tension that was palpable throughout the ballroom. The silence was now absolute, heavy, and expectant. "A beautiful speech, Julian," Elara said, her voice perfectly modulated, carrying through the microphone without a tremor. "You spoke of legacy. It's a word you use often." Julian forced a tight, dismissive laugh. "Elara, this isn't the time or the place." "On the contrary," she replied, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the entire room in. "I can think of no better place to discuss the Vance legacy than here in front of the monument you've built to it." She turned her head slightly, her eyes sweeping over Isabella for the first time. It was not a look of hatred or jealousy, but one of clinical assessment, as if observing a curious but ultimately insignificant specimen. "And no better time than when you are sharing the stage with your partner in shaping the future." The sarcasm was subtle, a razor blade wrapped in silk. Isabella flinched. Elara then turned her attention back to the audience. For over a century, The Vance family has been guided by two things: bold vision and unwavering integrity. One without the other is not progress. It is recklessness. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. From her evening bag, she withdrew the Vance family seal. It was larger and more substantial than a simple ring. She held it in her palm, the stage lights glinting off the polished gold and the deep blue of the lapis. It looked ancient, powerful, a piece of forgotten royalty. A gasp rippled through the older members of the crowd, those who knew the family's history. Beatrice Fairchild leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide. "Most of you see this as a family heirloom." Elara continued, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. "Julian once told me it was a symbol of my role as the soul of the family. It is a lovely sentiment. It is also incorrect." She held the seal up for all to see. "This is not just a symbol. According to the founding bylaws of Vance Holdings, bylaws drafted by a patriarch who understood that character was the ultimate collateral, this seal is an instrument of corporate governance." Julian's face had gone pale. "Elara, stop this," he hissed, taking a step toward her. She held up a hand, and he froze. It was a simple gesture, yet it held the force of an iron gate slamming shut. "Article 9, Section 4. Elara announced, her voice as clear as a bell. "In the event of a moral emergency, defined as any public action by the chairman that brings profound and undeniable disgrace upon the family name, and thereby threatens the stability and reputation of the corporation, the designated holder of the family seal is granted the authority to call an emergency session of the board. And at that session," she let her eyes meet Julian's, "the holder of this seal casts the deciding vote on the chairman's fitness to lead." The silence in the room was shattered by a cacophony of frantic murmurs. Reporters were scribbling furiously. Lawyers were exchanging shocked glances. This wasn't a marital spat. This was a boardroom assassination. "You are confusing a sentimental tradition with corporate law." Julian stammered, his bravado crumbling. "Am I?" Elara's smile was chilling. Marcus Thorne of Sullivan and Cromwell reviewed the charter this afternoon. He confirmed its validity. "Perhaps you should have read the fine print of your own legacy, Julian." She took a step closer to him, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every word was picked up by the microphone. "You stand here tonight and speak of the future while publicly dishonoring the woman who is the legal guardian of your family's past and your children's future. You have confused your ego with an empire. You have compromised this company with your recklessness both personally and financially." She then looked out at the sea of stunned faces, her gaze sweeping across the board members who were present. "Consider this my formal invocation of Article 9, Section 4. An emergency board meeting will be convened tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I trust you will all be there." With that, she placed the Vance family seal deliberately on the podium, the heavy thud echoing like a gavel. She gave Julian one last lingering look, not of anger, but of pity. Then, without a backward glance at him or the woman clinging to his arm, she turned and walked off the stage. The silence held for a moment longer before the room erupted into absolute chaos. Elara Vance did not run. She walked head held high through the pandemonium she had unleashed, the architect of a demolition so precise no one had seen it coming. The chaos of the gala was merely the overture. The real battle would be fought not in the court of public opinion, but in the sterile, soundproofed boardroom on the 80th floor of the old Vance Tower. Elara knew that her public gambit was just that, an opening move. Julian was cornered, but not defeated. He was charismatic, ruthless, and he had spent years cultivating loyalty among the board members, men and women who owed their careers to him. She had the law on her side, but power is rarely so straightforward. She didn't go home. The penthouse felt tainted a stage for a different kind of performance. Instead, she had her driver take her to the Carlisle, where she had booked a suite under her maiden name, Ilara Thorne, a small act of reclaiming her own identity. She spent less than an hour there, changing from her emerald gown into a sharply tailored navy blue suit. Then she made a call. Her destination was a place of old power, a Georgian mansion in the quiet hills of Westchester County. It was the home of Arthur Vance Sr., Julian's father, and the retired patriarch of the empire. Arthur was a relic of a different era, a gruff, formidable man who believed in honor, tradition, and the sanctity of the Vance name above all else. He had been fond of Ilara in a distant paternal way, but he worshipped his son. Convincing him would be like moving a mountain. She found him in his library, a vast room of dark wood and leather, a portrait of his own stern father glowering down from above the marble fireplace. He was nursing a brandy, the news from the gala having already reached him. "You've made a terrible mess, Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't ask her to sit. "No, Arthur," she replied, her voice firm, refusing to be intimidated. "Julian made a mess. I have simply begun the process of cleaning it up. You humiliated my son. You humiliated this family in front of the entire city. Your son did that when he chose to publicly discard his wife and flaunt his mistress on a stage bearing our family name." She countered her calm, unwavering. "He did it when he used company funds to finance his affair. He did it when he valued his ego more than a century of Vance integrity." She walked to the large oak desk and placed a slim leather-bound folio upon it. It was David Chen's report, condensed and annotated by her lawyers. "This is not about infidelity, Arthur. This is about fitness to lead. Read it. It details the shell corporations, the fraudulent art purchases, the compromised stock options. He has exposed this company to shareholder lawsuits and a media firestorm that will cripple the stock price by morning." Arthur stared at the folio, then back at her. His eyes narrowed. "He is my son. He built the Meridian. He built it with Vance money and Vance resources." Ilara said, her voice softening slightly, shifting from accusation to strategy. "He is a brilliant builder. I have never denied that. But he has forgotten what the name on that tower truly represents. It represents you. It represents his grandfather. It represents my children, Liam and Sophia." The mention of his grandchildren, the future of the line, was the first chink in his armor. He finally gestured to a chair. "What do you want, Ilara? I want to save the company," she said simply. "Julian is compromised. His judgment is clouded. When the market opens, our competitors will smell blood in the water. We need to project strength, stability. We need a new leader immediately." "And I suppose you think that should be you?" he scoffed. "No," Ilara said, and this surprised him. "That would be seen as a vengeful coup. Too messy. We need a steady hand. Someone the board and the street will respect without question. Someone who represents continuity and tradition." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I think it should be you." Arthur stared at her, genuinely stunned. He had been retired for 10 years. "You resume your role as interim chairman," Ilara explained, laying out her plan. "Your presence will calm the markets. It shows the old guard is back in control. I will take a seat on the board, as is my right by marriage, and as a significant shareholder in my children's trust. I will oversee a special committee on corporate governance to undo the damage Julian has done. We will present a united front, a family protecting its legacy." He was silent for a long time, swirling the brandy in his glass, the gears of his formidable mind turning. He was a proud man, and Julian's public behavior was a deep stain on his own name. Elara hadn't come to him as a crying, betrayed wife. She had come as a strategist, offering him a path back to power and a way to salvage the family's honor. She had appealed not to his heart, but to his most sacred value, the legacy. "He will fight you," Arthur said finally. "He will fight us both." "Yes, he will," Elara agreed. "He will call in every favor, but he is leading with emotion and arrogance. We will lead with facts and with the full weight of the Vance name. With your support and the evidence in that folio, the board will have no choice. They must choose between a compromised visionary and the patriarch who built the company into what it is today." She stood to leave. "The meeting is at 9. The seal gives me the deciding vote in a tie. With you it won't be a tie. It will be an abdication." Arthur looked from the folio on his desk to the powerful portrait of his father. He saw the same steely resolve in the eyes of his daughter-in-law. He slowly, deliberately stood up. "I will be there," he said. Elara nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of their new, fragile alliance. As she left the quiet mansion and stepped back into the cool night air, she knew she had secured her most powerful piece. The kingdom was gathering. The 80-story climb in the private elevator was a journey through a column of silence. Elara stood perfectly still, her reflection a stark silhouette against the polished chrome walls. She was ascending into the heart of the empire she had helped build, to the place where Julian was king. But today, she was not coming as his queen. She was coming as the executor of a long-dormant law, an instrument of a justice he had long since forgotten. The boardroom on the 80th floor was designed to intimidate. It was a masterpiece of corporate power, a long, cavernous space encased in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a godlike panorama of Manhattan. The city sprawled below a toy set of ambition and dreams, humbled by the viewer's sheer altitude. In the center of the room sat a vast, monolithic table of polished black obsidian, so reflective it seemed to hold a darker, colder version of the sky above. 12 high-backed leather chairs were arranged around it, thrones for the titans of industry. Elara was the first to arrive. Punctuality, like patience, was a strategic asset. She wanted to occupy the space to let it become hers before the battle began. She walked the length of the room, her footsteps silent on the plush, charcoal-grey carpet. She didn't take a seat at either end of the table, the traditional seats of power, but chose a chair at the very center of its long side. It was a deliberate choice. She was not here to seize the throne, but to act as the fulcrum upon which the entire structure would pivot. On the gleaming obsidian surface, she placed 2 objects, the slim, lethal folio of evidence, and beside it, the Vance family seal. The ancient gold and lapis lazuli looked almost alien in the hyper-modern setting, a piece of old-world magic amidst cold, hard commerce. The board members began to file in a collection of men and women who collectively controlled billions of dollars. They entered in hushed tones, the usual back-slapping camaraderie entirely absent. The air was thick with the news from the gala. They saw Elara, a solitary, composed figure, and their reactions were telling. Robert Caldwell, the company's lead counsel, and a man whose loyalty to Julian was legend, gave her a curt, dismissive nod before taking the seat to the right of the chairman's empty chair. Eleanor Hayes, a sharp woman in her late 60s, who had served on the board alongside Arthur Vance for 2 decades, offered Elara a look of grim, sympathetic respect. Ben Carter, the youngest board member, a tech wunderkind who valued data above all else, simply observed her with an unreadable, analytical gaze. Julian arrived 5 minutes late, a calculated power move that fell flat in the tense atmosphere. He strode in, attempting an air of defiant bravado. He was immaculately dressed, but the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hand as he placed his briefcase on the table betrayed a sleepless night. He ignored Elara completely, instead greeting Caldwell and a few other allies with a forced warmth that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze, however, kept flicking toward the seal on the table as if it were a venomous snake. The final arrival silenced the room. Arthur Vance, Sr., entered his presence, sucking the remaining oxygen from the air. He didn't look like a retired man. He looked like a king returning from exile. His face was set like granite, and his cold blue eyes, so like his son's, yet so much harder, swept across the room. He gave Elara a single, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, before taking the seat at the opposite head of the table from his son. The message was clear. The family was divided, and the patriarch had chosen his side. Robert Caldwell, acting as Julian's proxy, called the meeting to order. His voice was smooth, but laced with aggression. "We are convened today under the dubious invocation of a little-known and frankly archaic clause by Mrs. Elara Vance. Before we proceed, I want to state for the record that it is the position of the chairman that this is a gross misuse of corporate procedure, an attempt to leverage a domestic dispute. My husband's affair is indeed a domestic dispute, Robert." Elara's voice cut through his calm and sharp as shattered glass. Everyone turned to her. She had not raised her voice yet. She commanded the room. "However, I did not invoke Article 9 because my husband was unfaithful. I invoked it because the chairman of Vance Holdings has become a liability to this corporation." She opened the folio. "I am not here today as a scorned wife. I am here as a custodian of this family's legacy, and more importantly, as a protector of shareholder value. The moral emergency I cited is not a matter of the heart. It is a matter of the balance sheet." Her professionalism was a bucket of ice water on the simmering drama. This was a language the board understood. Julian finally spoke, his voice tight with fury. "This is absurd. Elara, you are an architect. You know nothing of the complexities of corporate finance." "I know how to read a ledger, Julian," she replied without looking at him, her attention focused on the board members. "And I know fraud when I see it." She proceeded with the dispassionate precision of a surgeon to lay out her case. She didn't make accusations. She presented facts. She slid copies of bank statements, property leases, and internal expense reports across the table. "Exhibit A," she began. "A lease agreement for a luxury apartment in Soho, paid for over the last 18 months, not by Julian Vance personally, but by a subsidiary of Vance Holdings under the budget code for off-site project development. Total expenditure $450,000. The sole resident of that apartment, Ms. Isabella Rossi." She continued, her voice never wavering. "Exhibit B, a series of transactions funneling over $3 million to a shell corporation named Rossi International Art. This money was earmarked for the procurement of lobby art for the Meridian. The director of this corporation is a Mr. Marco Rossi, Isabella Rossi's first cousin, an independent appraisal of the art purchased." She slid a new document forward. "Values it at less than $500,000. Where Julian did the other $2.5 million go?" A wave of shock rippled through the room. This was no longer about a mistress. This was embezzlement, plain and simple. And finally, Exhibit C. Elara said, her voice dropping slightly. An executive review signed by Julian, authorizing a grant of backdated stock options to Ms. Rossi, citing her singular and unprecedented contributions to the Meridian project. Contributions so singular, they warranted a compensation package triple that of our head of engineering, a man with 30 years of experience. These options have diluted the value of every share held by everyone in this room, and every public shareholder we are sworn to protect. She sat back, her presentation finished. She had laid the foundation of his downfall brick by evidentiary brick. Julian was ashen-faced. He looked cornered, a predator suddenly finding himself in a cage. "This is creative accounting," he stammered, looking at his allies for support. "The cost of doing business on a project of this scale, every great man has his expenses. Look at the tower we built. It will generate billions in revenue. This is a rounding error. A rounding error." It was Eleanor Hayes who spoke, her voice laced with icy contempt. "We are not the Medici court, Julian. We are a publicly traded company with a fiduciary duty. What you call expenses, the SEC would call wire fraud." Ben Carter, the pragmatist, leaned forward. "Forget the SEC for a moment. The reputational risk is catastrophic. When this leaks, and it will leak, our stock will plummet. We'll be buried in shareholder lawsuits for years. Your indiscretion," he said the word distastefully, "is no longer a personal matter. It's a multi-billion-dollar crisis." Julian, desperate, turned on Elara. "Look at her. This is nothing but a vengeful fantasy. She's been planning this, trying to destroy me because she couldn't keep me." The personal attack hung in the air, ugly and raw. Before Elara could respond, Arthur Vance, Sr., spoke for the first time. His voice was low, heavy, and filled with a terrible, weary sadness. "Enough, Julian." The two words fell like boulders into the room. "When I handed this company to you," Arthur continued, his eyes locked on his son, "I gave you one piece of advice. I told you that any man can build something tall, but it takes a man of character to build something that lasts. The Vance name is not just a brand on a building. It is supposed to be a guarantee of integrity. A bond. You have taken that bond, that sacred trust we have built over a century, and you have sold it off cheap to finance your sordid little affair." He gestured toward Elara. "You speak of her as if she is the enemy. This woman has raised your children. She has stood by your side with a grace you have never deserved. And today she has shown more courage and more concern for the future of this company than you have in the past 2 years. You did not just betray your wife, son. You betrayed your name. You betrayed me." The condemnation from his father broke something in Julian. The rage and defiance drained away, leaving behind a hollow, desperate man. Robert Caldwell, seeing the battle was lost, tried to salvage the situation. A vote for removal would be an admission of guilt. It would create chaos. "The chaos has already been created, Robert," Elara said calmly. "What we are doing now is restoring order." Caldwell grimaced. "Then we must call the vote. The motion on the floor invoked by Mrs. Vance is for the temporary removal of Julian Vance as chairman of the board, pending a full internal and external investigation. We will vote in order of seniority." He looked directly at Eleanor Hayes, the most senior member after Arthur. "Aye," Eleanor said instantly, her voice clear. The vote went around the table. 2 of Julian's staunchest allies, men he'd brought onto the board himself, voted nay, their voices weak. The others were a cascade of ayes, each one a nail in Julian's coffin. It came down to the final two members, before Caldwell and Julian himself. The vote stood at 4 for removal, 3 against. A young woman named Sarah Jenkins, who ran the company's tech division, hesitated, looking from Julian's desperate face to Ilara's calm one. "Aye," she whispered. The final member, a gruff manufacturing head, voted nay. The tally was 5 for removal, 4 against. Caldwell and Julian were yet to vote. "I vote nay," Caldwell announced as expected. The vote was 5 to 5. It all came down to Julian. In a final pathetic act of defiance, he would have to vote to save himself. "Nay," he choked out. The vote was 6 against removal, 5 for. It seemed he had survived by the slimmest of margins. But Caldwell had miscalculated the room. He turned to Ilara. "The motion fails." "You seem to be forgetting the clause under which we are convened, Robert," Ilara said, her voice cutting through his premature victory. "Article 9, Section 4 is explicit. In the event of an emergency vote concerning the chairman is recused from voting. His vote is not valid." Caldwell's face went white as he realized his error. The vote was, in fact, 5 to 5. A perfect tie. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the boardroom. Every person at the table that turned to look at Ilara. The city skyline watched indifferent. In that moment, 100 years of history, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and the future of the Vance family, all rested on her. Julian stared at her, his eyes now stripped of all anger and arrogance. They were pleading. In them, she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, the brilliant, charming boy who had promised her the world. He was begging her silently to remember that boy, to remember their life together, their children, to show mercy. Ilara's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. She thought of Liam and Sophia. She was not doing this to destroy their father, but to protect their future from his weakness. He saw mercy as forgiveness. She saw it as saving the legacy he was actively setting on fire. The foundation had to be sound for them. She met his pleading gaze, her expression unyielding. She picked up the Vance family seal. The gold was cool and heavy in her palm, a tangible link to the generations of women who had guarded the family's heart. She was simply the first who had to use it as a weapon. "As per the bylaws invoked," she announced, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "In the event of a tie, the deciding vote is cast by the holder of the family seal." She stood up, holding the seal for all to see. "On the matter of the removal of Julian Vance as chairman," she said, her voice echoing in the silent glass mausoleum, "I, Ilara Vance, cast my vote. For the protection of this company, for the preservation of this family's legacy, and for the future of my children, I vote aye." The word landed with the force of a guillotine. It was done. Julian Vance, the Titan. The visionary crumpled in his chair as if his strings had been cut. He made a small, wounded sound. The spell of his power was broken. Arthur Vance Sr. cleared his throat, his expression grim. "This board recognizes the motion has passed. I will assume the role of interim chairman effective immediately. Our first order of business will be to restore stability and integrity to Vance Holdings. This meeting is adjourned." The board members filed out quickly, murmuring amongst themselves, a palpable sense of relief mixing with the shock. They avoided looking at the man they had just deposed. Only Arthur, Ilara, and Julian remained. Arthur walked to his son. He didn't touch him. "You will clear out your desk," he said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "You will cooperate with the investigation, and you will not speak to the press. Is that understood?" Julian just nodded, staring blankly at the obsidian table. Arthur gave Alara one last look, a look of profound, weary respect, and then he too was gone. Now they were alone, the builder and the architect in the silent monument to their broken marriage. Was it worth it, Alara? Julian finally whispered, his voice raw with a pain she hadn't heard in years. Was destroying me worth it? Alara walked around the table until she stood before him. She looked down at the shattered man who was her husband, and for the first time she allowed the deep, profound hurt she had buried for so long to surface in her eyes. "You were already destroyed, Julian," she said, her voice soft but unforgiving. "You just hadn't hit the ground yet. I didn't destroy you. I just signed the demolition permit." She turned and walked away, her footsteps sure and steady, leaving him alone in the wreckage of the empire he had lost, with nothing but the panoramic view of a city that no longer felt like his. That night marked the fall of a king and the rise of a queen. The story of Alara Vance became a legend whispered in the halls of power, a testament to the fact that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room, but the most resolute mind. She didn't just reclaim her dignity. She seized control of her destiny, proving that the guardian of a family's heart can also be its fiercest protector. Her story is a powerful reminder that betrayal can be a catalyst, and that from the rubble of a broken promise, one can build an unshakable empire of self-worth. If this story of strategy, betrayal, and ultimate vindication resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of quiet strength. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more tales of intricate drama and powerful real-life events. What would you have done in Alara's position? Let us know in the comments below. Picture a sprawling driveway lined with century-old oak trees, their branches forming a grand shadowy canopy. At the end of this quiet approach stands the majestic Beauclair mansion, its marble columns gleaming under the moonlight. In the hush of midnight, a sleek black limousine pulls up to the front steps, delivering the triumphant millionaire Donovan Pierce. He's not alone. Clinging to his arm is Serena Quinn, a dazzling model with secrets of her own. Donovan steps out, brimming with confidence, prepared to flaunt his latest conquest. Little does he know, behind those massive double doors, his pregnant wife already waits, with a pair of earth-shattering surprises. Donovan Pierce was born in Santa Barbara, California, in the early 1980s. He was the youngest son of a middle-class family whose only luxury was a subscription to National Geographic. His parents, Randall and Josephine Pierce, both taught at the local community college. Though they were hardly wealthy, they instilled in Donovan the idea that knowledge could open doors that money alone could never pry open. Donovan, a sharp-eyed, wiry kid with a stubborn streak, found solace in reading about faraway lands. He dreamed of traveling to Africa, exploring the Amazon, and someday having enough money to live in a grand estate of his own. In high school, Donovan's natural charm made him popular among peers. Though not an exceptional athlete, he excelled in debate and showed a fierce determination to win any argument. Teachers praised him for his intelligence and tenacity, but behind the confident demeanor lay an unsatisfied hunger. He wanted more, always more. This insatiable thirst for success would become his defining trait, one that propelled him through life at breakneck speed. By the time he graduated, Donovan had his sights set on Stanford University. Through scholarships and financial aid, he secured enrollment in the prestigious institution. There, He fell in love with economics and business. By senior year, he was running an investment club with 40 members. They pooled their modest funds and tested the volatile waters of the stock market. Donovan didn't just want to break even, he wanted to crush the market. Armed with cunning strategies and long nights studying charts, he managed to bring their returns to remarkable heights. Word spread about his uncanny ability to see market trends before they became mainstream. Upon graduation, Donovan accepted a position at a well-known financial firm in New York. Only 22, he was already sitting in conference rooms with high-profile clients, including the likes of Warren Buffett's associates and other billionaires scouting fresh talent. Donovan took every opportunity he could to glean wisdom from these industry titans. His nights were spent with spreadsheets, analyzing stock movements, and his days were consumed by endless networking. Over the next decade, Donovan rose to prominence. He founded his own investment firm, Pierce Capital Management, and took his net worth from a humble few $1,000s to tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. Eventually, his name appeared on the covers of financial magazines. He became a recognized figure, invited to speak at conferences worldwide. Yet Donovan's ambition was boundless. He set his eyes on surpassing every record in the book and building a personal life that reflected his success. It was during this lofty ascent that he met Elizabeth Radcliffe, a descendant of old money. Elizabeth was a well-educated philanthropist, known for championing causes related to women's health. She was radiant in a quiet way, elegant, thoughtful, and with a moral compass that ran deeper than Donovan's relentless drive. Her mother, Caroline Radcliffe, was once part of a philanthropic circle involving the late Princess Diana, donating to charitable organizations across Europe. The Radcliffe heritage included a storied estate in the Hamptons and connections to aristocrats in England. Donovan was attracted to Elizabeth's poise and the air of dignity she carried wherever she went. Their relationship started gently long walks by the shoreline in East Hampton, quiet dinners at exclusive clubs, intellectual discussions about the future of finance and philanthropy. Before long, Donovan realized that Elizabeth wasn't just another accessory to be paraded around. She was a pillar of wisdom and stability, someone who kept him tethered to his humanity when greed tugged him off center. The world watched in fascination when Donovan and Elizabeth wed in a grand ceremony at the Radcliffe family's estate. Media outlets splashed their pictures across the front pages, calling it the merger of new money and old world grace. In an unexpected twist of sincerity, Donovan's vows to Elizabeth were heartfelt. He promised to love, protect, and treasure her, never letting wealth overshadow his devotion to her and any future family they might have. But the shadows of desire and ambition sometimes morph into darker forms. Even as Donovan soared to greater financial heights, he found himself haunted by a restless energy. He wanted excitement, passion, anything to satiate an appetite for novelty that neither Elizabeth's serene presence nor his legitimate business triumphs could fully feed. And so the seeds of betrayal were sown. Elizabeth's life had revolved around philanthropic ventures long before she met Donovan. But her marriage brought new challenges. She struggled to find a balance between supporting Donovan's insatiable ambitions and preserving her own identity. With each passing year, Donovan's name grew in the financial sector, which meant more publicity, more parties, more demands. Elizabeth attended numerous galas as the gracious hostess. She wore dazzling gowns, smiled for photos, and patiently listened to endless conversations about stocks and corporate expansions. In private, Elizabeth was not as meek as the media painted her to be. She had her convictions. She often confronted Donovan about certain investments that seemed questionable, environmentally damaging ventures, profits extracted from borderline unethical deals. Donovan would smile and reassure her that everything was within legal bounds. "This is how we fund your charities," he teased. "We do well, and then we do good." Most of the time, Elizabeth would sigh, letting the conversation fade. She recognized that Donovan's approach to business was a far cry from her father's genteel style. Still, she believed in her husband's underlying decency. Years into the marriage, Elizabeth yearned for a child. At first, Donovan brushed off the topic. "Let's solidify the business," he would say. "Let me cross a few major milestones, and then we'll talk about starting a family." Deep down, Elizabeth suspected Donovan was afraid to be pinned down by the responsibilities of fatherhood. He thrived on risk spontaneity and the freedom to jet off to Europe or Asia at a moment's notice if a deal demanded it. However, the unstoppable march of time and a near-death experience, Elizabeth's father had a sudden stroke, galvanized them. Realizing how fragile life could be, Donovan agreed they should try for a child. In the following months, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, and the new reality thrilled her. She glowed with expectancy, her philanthropic work pivoting to focus on maternal health and child welfare. Donovan seemed happy about the news at first, but his reaction lacked the effusive zeal Elizabeth had hoped for. She told herself it was simply Donovan's nature to remain collected, even about momentous life changes. During the pregnancy, Elizabeth took refuge in the quiet comforts of Beauclair Mansion, an estate the couple had purchased in the countryside of upstate New York. Surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills, it provided the perfect retreat from the swirling chaos of Manhattan life. There, away from public scrutiny, Elizabeth could focus on preparing for motherhood. Donovan often visited on weekends, always claiming he was too busy with urgent business deals during the week. As months rolled on, Elizabeth began to suspect that Donovan's late nights and business trips might not all be about closing deals. Even so, Elizabeth tried to cast aside her doubts. She had twins on the way, 2 lives growing within her 2 blessings that she believed would knit her and Donovan closer together. She wrote in her diary each day, documenting every emotional shift, every flutter in her belly, and every dream she had of a future filled with children's laughter, echoing through the mansion's halls. In these private moments, Elizabeth recounted her grandmother's stories of how love in a marriage was tested in unthinkable ways, but devotion and faith often carried couples through the darkest storms. She had no idea that her test would come so soon, or in such a heart-wrenching manner. Serena Quinn was the kind of woman people instinctively watched as soon as she walked into a room. With almond-shaped hazel eyes and wavy auburn hair cascading to her waist, she emanated a fiery energy that demanded attention. She had been raised in a modest household in San Diego, her father a retired Marine, her mother a struggling painter. Despite their limited means, Serena's parents poured their hearts into supporting her talents, whether it was ballet painting or modeling. By 18, Serena signed with an upscale modeling agency and discovered a taste for the finer things in life. The swirling lights of fashion, shows designer gowns, and the glittering stares of cameras dazzled her. She lived for backstage parties and exclusive VIP events where she rubbed shoulders with celebrities and moguls. Over time, she learned how to charm men of power. That charm wasn't always innocent. For Serena, it became a method of survival and advancement in a cutthroat world. If she played her cards right, she could secure financial stability that might otherwise elude her. Her path crossed with Donovan Pierce on a private yacht off the coast of Monaco. Donovan was there for a high-profile tech conference, and Serena had been hired to model for a European luxury brand. The second Donovan saw her laughing on the deck, wearing an opulent emerald gown that clung to her figure, he felt an old, forbidden spark ignite. He introduced himself with characteristic smoothness, Donovan Pierce, of Pierce Capital Management. Might I ask whose stunning presence I'm fortunate enough to share this deck with? Serena knew the name anyone in high society did. She smiled coyly. Serena Quinn. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Pierce. Over champagne flutes, they exchanged banter about the future of cryptocurrencies and the enthralling but superficial nature of fashion. She was witty. He was enthralled. One conversation led to another, and soon the shimmering lights of Monaco's coastline faded into the hush of the night. Donovan found himself lost in Serena's raw magnetism, a stark contrast to Elizabeth's graceful composure. Despite knowing full well that he was married, his ring was conspicuous, and the media had documented his marriage extensively. Serena fueled Donovan's flirtation. To her, men like Donovan offered not just adventure, but entry into circles with deeper pockets. The moral transgression didn't worry her. She had grown accustomed to seeing powerful men cheat on their wives, and in her line of work, infidelity was treated as a negotiable taboo. Before the yacht docked, Donovan and Serena shared a clandestine kiss on the upper deck, hidden from prying eyes by the summer darkness. Donovan told himself it was just a fleeting moment of indiscretion. He was a man on top of the world. Why shouldn't he savor every flavor of pleasure life offered? But fleeting infatuations can quickly grow into an all-consuming secret. When Donovan returned to New York, he found excuses to see Serena again, ostensibly for business, though they both knew it was anything but. She became his shadow at exclusive clubs, late-night penthouse soirees and business trips where he needed a companion to keep him entertained. He showered her with designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and even helped her land more lucrative modeling gigs. Serena, for her part, clung to Donovan's generosity, offering him the rush of a hidden romance he couldn't get from his stable married life. Weeks turned into months, and their affair deepened. Serena reveled in the luxurious life Donovan provided: 5-star hotels, exotic vacations, lavish gifts. Meanwhile, Donovan craved her presence like a drug, ignoring any semblance of guilt. He told himself Elizabeth was preoccupied with her charities. Her pregnancy, there was no harm in letting off some steam. In a moment of recklessness, Donovan invited Serena to spend a weekend at Beauclair Mansion. It was an impulsive plan, born from a chaotic swirl of desire and pride. After all, Elizabeth was supposed to be spending those days in Manhattan for a friend's baby shower, or so Donovan believed. Little did he realize Elizabeth had cut her city trip short, too exhausted to endure the social rigmarole, and determined to relax in her own home. Destiny was about to orchestrate a collision of secrets, lies, and revelations that would upend everyone's lives. Under the silver glow of a crescent moon, Donovan's limousine glided up to Beauclair Mansion's gates. The estate's sweeping landscape looked hauntingly beautiful. Tall cypress trees swayed, and the ornate fountain at the entrance sparkled with watery moonbeams. Serena leaned against Donovan in the back seat, her manicured nails lightly tracing patterns on his arm. She giggled. "I can't believe you own all of this. It's like a castle from a fairy tale." "Wait until you see the inside," Donovan bragged. "Your jaw will drop." He had always wanted to show off Beauclair to Serena. It was one of his ultimate trophies, a testament to how far he'd climbed from his humble upbringing. He had told the chauffeur to arrive late, betting that the staff would be minimal at this hour. Normally, Elizabeth might have been at the mansion, but Donovan was confident she was in Manhattan until Monday. He anticipated a weekend of unrestrained passion and indulgence, free from prying eyes and moral repercussions. To ensure privacy, Donovan had earlier texted Mrs. Hathaway, Beauclair's long-standing housekeeper, telling her to take Sunday off. He explained that he had a private gathering with an important client. Mrs. Hathaway dutifully obeyed, leaving only a skeleton crew on night duty. Donovan had also given strict instructions to keep the gates closed and to remain out of sight unless summoned. Everything was orchestrated like a stage play, with Donovan as the star performer. However, Donovan's carefully crafted plan crumbled the moment the limousine approached the circular driveway. The grand double doors of the mansion swung open, and out stepped Elizabeth. Clearly pregnant, her usually gentle face etched with outrage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, the fabric of her pale blue maternity dress fluttering in the night breeze. The overhead carriage lights illuminated her figure, making her look both ethereal and formidable. Donovan felt his breath catch in his throat. Confusion and dread erupted within him. For a moment, Serena was just as stupefied, her eyes darting between Donovan and the furious woman on the threshold. "Who is that?" she whispered sharply, though deep down she suspected the answer. No one spoke as the driver opened the door. Donovan stepped out first, feeling as though he were walking into a vortex of shame and disbelief. Elizabeth's voice finally cut through the silence. "So it's true," she hissed. "All the late nights, the secret phone calls, I tried to tell myself I was just being paranoid." Donovan opened his mouth but couldn't form words. Elizabeth's expression twisted a lethal mix of heartbreak and anger. Her gaze flicked to Serena, who also emerged from the limousine, her face partially hidden by large designer sunglasses she'd neglected to remove. For a second, Serena contemplated slinking back inside the car, but she was too frozen to move. Beneath the mansion's elegant facade, the entire world was about to unravel. Inside Beauclair's sweeping foyer, marbled floors gleamed under a chandelier of crystal teardrops. Donovan stood rooted near the grand staircase, Serena a few feet behind him, feeling acutely like an intruder. Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, demanded answers. Her voice echoed off the polished surfaces, driving home the magnitude of this confrontation. "How long has this been going on?" she shouted, eyes locked on Donovan. "How many times have you lied to me?" Serena's gaze darted nervously. She cleared her throat and decided on an apology, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'm so sorry." I didn't realize Elizabeth cut her off. "Didn't realize what exactly? That he has a wife? That I'm carrying his children?" Her voice trembled with bitterness, and her hands pressed against her swollen belly. Donovan finally snapped out of his stupor. "Elizabeth!" He began stepping closer. "I didn't mean for any of this." She pulled away, tears shimmering on the brink. "Don't come near me." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the distance. It felt as though nature itself lamented the betrayal unfolding within Beauclair's walls. Donovan's mind churned, searching for a plausible explanation, an apology, a gesture that might quell the fury and heartbreak swirling through the foyer. Yet nothing he could say would excuse what he'd done. Behind him, Serena said softly, "I'll just get my things and go." She aimed for an exit strategy, hoping to salvage any shred of dignity. But Elizabeth wasn't done. "So you leave now, and what then? Another rendezvous in some penthouse next week? Another weekend in a mansion you both think you own?" She shot Donovan a look of pure venom. "You want to embarrass me in front of the entire world, Donovan, because the paparazzi will eat this alive. There's no hiding from it. A hush enveloped them, broken only by the faint pitter-patter of rain starting outside. Serena gripped her handbag, panic in her eyes. Donovan realized in that instant the severity of his situation. A pregnant wife, a mistress, and a public image that could collapse under the weight of scandal. Before anyone could speak again, Elizabeth crumpled to her knees, a sharp cry escaping her lips. Donovan rushed to her side, alarmed. "Elizabeth!" he exclaimed. "What's wrong?" Her face contorted in pain, her arms instinctively encircling her belly. I think something's wrong with the babies." The sight of Elizabeth in apparent distress jolted Donovan's paternal instincts. He forgot about Serena, about the affair, about everything else. He scooped Elizabeth into his arms. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, voice trembling. At his instruction, the still-present chauffeur quickly rearranged plans to drive to the nearest emergency room. By now, Serena was shaking, unsure if she should stay or slip out unnoticed. Ultimately, she followed them to the limousine perched uncomfortably in the back seat, while Donovan cradled Elizabeth. The ride felt like an eternity each second, thick with tension and fear. Never had Donovan felt so powerless. This was not a financial crisis he could fix with a quick injection of capital or a brilliant stock trade. He was on the brink of losing everything he claimed mattered to him, and possibly even losing the unborn children he had so carelessly taken for granted. They arrived at St. Bernardine's Medical Center in the dead of night, the doors of the emergency ward sliding open under harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses rushed Elizabeth into an examination room, Donovan trailing closely behind. He hovered by her side, watching with dread as monitors beeped and doctors administered IV lines. Serena lingered in the waiting area, hands clasped tightly, face pale. She felt starkly out of place. A nurse, noticing her anxious demeanor, whispered, "Are you family?" Serena shook her head, barely managing a polite smile. She took a seat, struggling with a mix of guilt, fear, and resentment. Resentment toward Donovan for putting her in this humiliating position. Guilt for playing a role in what might be a catastrophic medical emergency. Inside the examination room, the obstetrician delivered cautious news. Elizabeth was having contractions prematurely, possibly triggered by emotional stress. The babies were at risk if her blood pressure didn't stabilize soon. Donovan felt a crushing weight. This was the real consequence of his duplicity. Not just an angry spouse or a ruined social reputation, but the potential harm to innocent lives. With quiet efficiency, Elizabeth was transferred to a private room in the maternity wing. Donovan sat by her bedside, stroking her hand, feeling both helpless and regretful. He tried to speak to offer some comfort, but Elizabeth flinched away. Her eyes flickered with pain and betrayal. She was a woman who had given her heart, body, and trust to a man who'd taken all three for granted. Hours crawled by. The hospital's white corridors and antiseptic odor provided the backdrop for Donovan's introspection. He had always prided himself on having control over markets, over deals, over his life's narrative. Yet here he was, powerless. In the waiting area, Serena wrestled with her own turmoil. She texted a friend. "Stuck at a hospital. Disaster night. Call you later." She couldn't bring herself to leave. A part of her needed closure, needed Donovan to acknowledge her. But as dawn approached, she realized how naive that longing was. She overheard bits of conversation between nurses. Elizabeth was stabilized, the twins appeared unharmed for now. But the emotional damage was incalculable. Eventually, Donovan emerged from Elizabeth's room, dark circles under his eyes. He approached Serena, who stood up hastily, her posture stiff. In the empty corridor, they exchanged hushed words. "Are you okay?" Serena asked, her voice trembling with concern. "Not really." Donovan admitted, his tone frayed. "Elizabeth's resting now. The babies seem to be okay, but it was close. I can't." He swallowed, unable to complete the thought. Serena nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. "I didn't want this to happen." Donovan let out a shaky breath. "Go back to the mansion, or a hotel. I'll make arrangements for you. But I can't leave Elizabeth." Serena searched his face, hoping for some signal that their relationship mattered. Instead, she saw a broken man, guilt-ridden and desperate to cling to his wife and unborn children. Words felt futile. She only managed a nod before turning to walk away, the corridor lights flickering overhead like a silent judgment. In that moment, Donovan understood that the life he thought he could compartmentalize was shattered. There would be no neat division between his respectable existence with Elizabeth and his clandestine affair with Serena. Everything had collided, and the fallout would test every inch of his fortitude and Elizabeth's. News travels fast in privileged circles. By mid-morning, Elizabeth's parents, Andrew and Caroline Radcliffe, arrived at the hospital in a flurry of concern and indignation. Caroline, her posture ramrod straight, confronted Donovan in the corridor. "You liar!" she hissed, jabbing a finger at his chest. "You made promises, Donovan. My daughter's life and the lives of my grandchildren are at risk because of your disgraceful behavior." Andrew, a gentle man by nature, seemed older and more frail than usual, grief etching lines across his face. "I trusted you," he said softly, his voice laden with disappointment. "You were the one who insisted on waiting for children until you were ready to be a father." And now this Donovan bowed his head, too ashamed to meet their gazes. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Truly I am. Nothing I say will justify what happened." Caroline gave a scornful laugh. "That's about the only honest thing you've said so far." With Elizabeth stable but emotionally shattered, the medical staff advised minimal stress to prevent another crisis. It was agreed that for now, Donovan could stay at the hospital. He was, after all, Elizabeth's next of kin, but the Radcliffes made it clear they'd watch him like hawks. Every hour, Donovan checked in on Elizabeth, who maintained a stony silence. She gazed out the window, tears occasionally sliding down her cheeks. Sometimes Donovan tried to hold her hand or whisper an apology. Each time, she pulled away. When evening arrived, the Radcliffes insisted on a family discussion without Elizabeth. Donovan, Andrew, and Caroline convened in a small hospital cafeteria, the smell of coffee and antiseptic heavy in the air. The conversation was tense voices, kept to a low hush. Caroline wasted no time. "Donovan, we want you to leave Elizabeth alone until she recovers. You'll take care of her medical expenses, of course, but you're to stay away until she explicitly asks for you." "Understood." Donovan's mouth felt dry. "Elizabeth is my wife. I can't abandon her in the hospital." Andrew softened his tone. "We're not saying abandon her. We're saying give her space. Right now, your presence might be doing more harm than good." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Who knows how many indiscretions you've had behind her back? As far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of explaining to do." "Yes," Andrew agreed. "And perhaps to a divorce lawyer as well." The word divorce lodged like a bullet in Donovan's chest. He'd never considered that Elizabeth might actually leave him and take the children with her. The possibility ripped open a chasm of fear. At that moment, Donovan realized how precarious his entire empire was. Losing Elizabeth didn't just mean losing the facade of a happy marriage. It could also mean losing the moral anchor that had partially legitimatized his high society persona. Without Elizabeth, Donovan Pierce was just another scheming, heartless tycoon with questionable ethics and no family to give him depth or redemption. "Please," he murmured, voice raw. "Don't talk of divorce yet. Let me do whatever it takes to earn her trust back." Caroline exhaled sharply. "That's up to Elizabeth. For now, respect her wishes. If she wants to see you, fine. If she doesn't, you'll keep away." Donovan nodded, too grief-stricken to argue. The only thing that mattered now was Elizabeth's health and the safety of the twins. Little by little, he realized the irreparable damage he'd caused. If he ever wanted to regain Elizabeth's love, or even her tolerance, he would have to face an arduous road of restitution, if such a thing was even possible. The weekend passed in a blur. Elizabeth showed signs of improvement, though her emotional wounds were far from healed. Donovan took Caroline's advice and stayed mostly away, visiting briefly when Elizabeth gave the green light. He spent his nights at a penthouse suite in a nearby hotel, making calls to business associates and cancelling all non-essential trips. Serena Quinn, meanwhile, disappeared from his immediate orbit. He'd arranged for her to stay in a luxurious suite at the Ritz-Carlton, and he covered the tab without question. Their exchanges were reduced to terse text messages. She resented being sidelined, but had no choice. During this tumultuous period, Donovan discovered that personal crises had a way of exposing hidden vulnerabilities in his business empire. A damaging rumor circulated that he was stepping away from Pierce Capital Management due to family issues. Boards of directors, already anxious about market fluctuations, began to question the stability of Donovan's leadership. Some clients hinted they might shift their funds elsewhere if Donovan couldn't personally oversee their accounts. In the midst of these professional woes, Donovan received an unexpected visitor, Rita Halberd, a young journalist from a prominent financial magazine. Rita had sensed the scandal swirling around the Pierce household and wanted an exclusive story. She cornered Donovan in the hospital lobby, a polite but determined expression on her face. "Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry to bother you at this difficult time." She began pressing the record button on her phone. "But rumors are circulating about trouble in your personal life affecting your company. Is there any comment you'd like to make?" Donovan forced a composed smile. "I don't discuss personal matters with the press, Miss Halberd. My family is my priority right now. Pierce Capital Management remains fully operational." Rita persisted. "Any truth to the allegations about an affair causing your wife's hospitalization?" His jaw clenched. No comment. When a security guard intervened, escorting Rita away, Donovan felt a jolt of dread. Despite his best attempts to keep the scandal under wraps, the story was leaking. He later discovered that paparazzi photos of him and Serena in Monte Carlo had been making rounds online, fueling speculation. The worst part was that Elizabeth's heartbreak was now tabloid fodder. Back at Beauclair Mansion, Elizabeth returned to recuperate under medical supervision. Her parents insisted on staying with her, but she also had some quiet moments to reflect. Late one afternoon, Elizabeth found her way to a seldom-used drawing room lined with dusty oil paintings of the estate's previous owners. There she sank into a velvet armchair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. Her mind replayed the last few days, the confrontation, the hospital, scare, the taste of betrayal. She recalled times when Donovan had been tender and loving, such as the night he proposed. He had taken her to a small island off the coast of Croatia, where they strolled along a moonlit beach. He promised her a life of wonder and fulfillment. Now those sweet memories clashed with the stinging reality of his infidelity. She wondered if she had been naive, ignoring subtle warning signs all along. The late-night calls, the new cologne that smelled nothing like Donovan's usual preference, the random missing hours he could never fully explain. Perhaps she should have confronted him sooner. Perhaps she should have demanded he slow down, focus on their marriage before it was too late. But regrets, she realized, could never undo the present. In a small burst of determination, Elizabeth pressed a hand against her belly. The twins moved gently, as if sensing her emotions. She whispered, "We'll be okay. With or without him, we'll make it." For all her heartbreak, Elizabeth realized she wasn't powerless. She had the children to think about, and her own dignity. If Donovan thought he could just walk in and out of their lives at will, he was mistaken. Serena Quinn, temporarily sequestered in the Ritz-Carlton, found that the novelty of plush robes and room service quickly waned when tethered to a scandal. She felt like a caged bird, feeding on scraps of reassurance from Donovan's sporadic texts. "We'll talk soon," he would say, or "Need time to handle family matters." Weeks ago, Serena would have found these messages acceptable, even promising. Now they felt dismissive. She resented being treated as an inconvenient afterthought. One evening, in a fit of frustration, she sought out an old friend in the city, a PR specialist named Miranda Vale. Over cocktails, Serena vented about her predicament, the broken promises, the mansion fiasco, and her uncertain future. Miranda listened with rapt attention, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of her martini. "You're so worried about Donovan's image," Miranda observed. "But what about yours? You stand to lose modeling contracts if this scandal blows up. Or you might actually use it to your advantage if you play your cards right." Serena bristled. She wasn't looking to become some gossip sensation. Yet the suggestion swirled in her mind. How could she salvage her own life? Maybe even elevate her status from this mess. A few days later, Miranda set up a clandestine meeting with a tabloid journalist, Kevin Brown, who was offering top dollar for an exclusive interview from the other woman. Serena vacillated. Did she really want to risk Donovan's wrath by selling their story? But the more Donovan ignored her calls, and the more anxious she felt about her livelihood, the more tempting the offer became. Finally, after one particularly icy text from Donovan, "I can't talk right now." "Please stop calling," Serena snapped. She had built her entire adult life on leveraging opportunities. Why should Donovan Pierce escape unscathed, preserving his marriage and reputation, while leaving her hung out to dry? So Serena met with Kevin Brown in a posh rooftop lounge, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf to hide her identity. She demanded a sizable sum for any details about her affair with Donovan Pierce. Kevin, practically salivating at the prospect of a sensational scoop, agreed. Over hours and multiple drinks, Serena spilled enough intimate details to fuel a front-page headline in every major tabloid. She revealed their first meeting in Monaco, the hush-hush texts, the gifts, the clandestine weekends. The only thing she kept vague was the fiasco at Beauclair Mansion. Some details, she reasoned, might prove too dangerous or humiliating if fully exposed. By the time she left, the weight on Serena's shoulders felt partially lifted. She knew the story would break soon, that Donovan would likely feel betrayed and furious. But she also knew she needed to watch out for her own interests. If Donovan wasn't going to make good on his unspoken promises, if he was going to return to Elizabeth and freeze Serena out, then maybe Serena could seize control of the narrative. In a world where wealth and reputation meant everything public sympathy could be leveraged, perhaps in the end, she'd emerge from the scandal not as a regretful mistress, but as a cunning survivor. A week later, the tabloids erupted with headlines. Exclusive model Serena Quinn speaks out on Donovan Pierce affair. The public devoured every detail like vultures on fresh carrion. Pictures of Serena in Monaco in Donovan's penthouse and near Beauclair Mansion splashed across websites and social media feeds. Gossip shows debated the morality of powerful men who think they can have it all. Stock pundits speculated whether Pierce Capital Management would suffer a mass exodus of clients. Donovan woke up to a flurry of panicked calls from business partners, lawyers, and friends. Fury coursed through him at Serena's betrayal. He drafted multiple messages to her, each more accusatory than the last. But he never pressed send. He understood that escalation could lead to more damaging revelations. Instead, he pivoted into damage control, a meeting with his legal team to discuss defamation suits, a press statement asserting that personal matters do not affect the integrity of Pierce Capital's mission, and frantic phone calls to major stakeholders, reassuring them he was still firmly at the helm. Elizabeth, meanwhile, read the tabloids with disgust and heartbreak. She had heard enough from Donovan's admissions and the partial truths gleaned from staff at Beauclair. But seeing Serena's smug face on the covers made it all more real. Her parents tried to shield her from the media storm, but the magnitude was impossible to ignore. At one point, Elizabeth snapped at Caroline. "No more. I don't want to hear or see anything about that woman. It's my life, my marriage. I'll decide how to handle it." Yet a part of Elizabeth felt a strange, unexpected relief. The entire truth was now out there. No more secrets lurking. Donovan's humiliating betrayal was an open wound. Sometimes honesty, even when dragged unwillingly into the public eye, can mark the beginning of genuine healing or a definitive end. A few days into the media circus, Donovan managed to speak privately with Elizabeth at Beauclair. She was seated in the sunroom, a blanket over her lap, the warm glow of afternoon light shining through large glass windows. Her pregnancy was still precarious, but stable. A nurse milled about, ensuring Elizabeth's comfort. Donovan took a seat across from her, hands clasped. He looked thinner than usual, his eyes hollow with regret. "Elizabeth," he began, voice quivering. "I know I can never fully undo what I've done. But I want you to know I'm willing to do anything to make this right." She regarded him with a calmness that unnerved him. "You can't unbreak a heart, Donovan," she replied. "You can only see what grows from the pieces left behind." He swallowed hard, remembering the luminous woman he had married. The thought of losing her and the children shredded whatever bravado remained. "I'm committed to therapy, to counseling, anything you need. You and the twins are my priority now. I understand if you hate me, or if you'll never trust me again. But I want to try." Elizabeth let out a slow exhale. "I don't have answers yet. I need time to figure out what's best for me, and for our children. Right now, I need stability, no more public scandals, no more late-night cat-and-mouse games." "Can you promise me that much?" "Yes," Donovan whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "I promise." Elizabeth nodded. "Then give me space. Provide what I need for the babies and me. Maybe in time, we'll see if there's anything left of this marriage to salvage." Donovan rose to leave, feeling the smallest glimmer of hope. He bent down gently, kissed Elizabeth's forehead. She didn't resist, but neither did she reciprocate. He walked away with a reverent hush in his chest, determined to do better. uncertain if redemption was truly within reach. The next several months were a crucible of transformation for everyone involved. Elizabeth stayed at Beauclair Mansion, supported by private nurses and her parents. She meticulously prepared for the twins' arrival, reading parenting books, setting up a nursery, and confiding in a therapist recommended by her obstetrician. She recognized that despite Donovan's betrayal, her children deserved a father if he could prove worthy. Yet she also realized she was no longer the passive partner she might once have been. She contacted divorce lawyers, not as a definitive move, but as a precaution. Boundaries had to be drawn. Donovan embarked on a public apology tour, though not the typical kind with press conferences. Instead, he quietly reached out to key figures in his professional circle, explaining that he was going through a personal crisis and assuring them of his unwavering commitment to Pierce Capital. He donated a significant sum to maternal health charities, a gesture partly inspired by guilt, partly by a genuine desire to mend the harm. In a rare display of humility, he sought out a private counselor, a stepsister of a friend. Sessions were grueling, forcing him to confront his reckless impulses, his childhood insecurities, and the toxic pursuit of wealth as a balm for every emotion. He began to see that the same drive that made him a financial success had also corroded his personal life. Serena, meanwhile, found herself both famous and infamous. She was approached by multiple agencies to exploit her new celebrity, but serious brands viewed her as a liability. She capitalized on her notoriety by launching a line of low-tier beauty products, hawked relentlessly on social media. Certain tabloids praised her for bravery in exposing a billionaire, but the more discerning corners of society labeled her a shameless opportunist. She struggled with the knowledge that she might never escape the shadow of this scandal. On lonely nights in her new penthouse, a parting gift from a short-lived romance with another wealthy patron, she questioned whether she had really gained anything from this affair or simply sabotaged her own integrity. As for the public, the scandal became old news once another sensational headline captured their short attention span: Donovan Pierce and Elizabeth Radcliffe. Pierce were yesterday's gossip replaced by new controversies. However, the financial world did not forget so quickly. Donovan faced extra scrutiny in every new venture. Some of his bolder clients grew leery, no longer seeing him as infallible. He moved carefully, treading water to maintain his empire's stability, while balancing the turbulent waters of his personal life. On a chilly December evening, months after the scandal first broke, Elizabeth went into labor. The staff at Beauclair hustled, calling the doctor and preparing to take her to the hospital. Donovan, who was in Manhattan finalizing a major business deal, was alerted immediately. Without hesitation, he dropped everything. He had a private helicopter on standby for emergencies, and this was certainly one. Within an hour, Donovan arrived at the hospital breathless and terrified. He found Elizabeth already in the delivery room, her face contorted with pain, her parents at her side. She spotted Donovan, and a fleeting look of relief crossed her features before another contraction seized her. All through the grueling hours, Donovan held Elizabeth's hand. Each time she cried out, he whispered words of encouragement, telling her how strong she was, how close they were to finally holding their children. If she bore any lingering resentment, it was eclipsed by the primal, overwhelming task of giving birth. At precisely 2:14 a.m., the first baby emerged a boy with tiny flailing limbs and a robust cry. The doctor smiled. "He's healthy," she announced, placing the newborn on Elizabeth's chest. A minute later, his twin sister followed, smaller, but equally vocal about her entrance into the world. Donovan was unable to contain his tears as he beheld his children for the first time. He kissed Elizabeth's forehead, flooding with gratitude, regret, and awe all at once. Elizabeth turned to look at him, tears in her own eyes, and gave a single nod of acknowledgement. It was too soon to say if forgiveness was in the cards, but at that moment they were bound by the pure miracle of these new lives. In the weeks following the twins' birth, a cautious détente settled over Beauclair Mansion. Elizabeth allowed Donovan to stay in a guest suite. He took paternal leave from Pierce Capital, focusing on midnight feedings, diaper changes, and singing lullabies. The cracks in their relationship remained, but caring for their infants forged a tenuous bridge. The twins, named Alexander and Amelia, became the center of everyone's world. Donovan discovered that holding these fragile beings in his arms gave him a sense of purpose far beyond financial gain. Some nights he'd find Elizabeth gazing at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at how dedicated a father he'd become. Other nights, tensions rose particularly when the memory of his betrayal loomed. But the babies acted as a balm, reminding both parents that they had two tiny reasons to try. Elizabeth's parents helped, but eventually they returned to their own estate, trusting that Elizabeth was strong enough now to stand on her own. A wave of quiet negotiations began between Elizabeth's legal team and Donovan's lawyers' discussions about trusts for the children, potential separation agreements, property, settlements. Yet Elizabeth remained non-committal about a final decision. She sought more clarity on Donovan's sincerity before making her choice. At times, Donovan found himself on the edge of losing patience. He wanted redemption, wanted Elizabeth to declare that they could fully reconcile. But each time he felt that eagerness, he reminded himself that trust once shattered cannot be hastily mended. He forced himself to give Elizabeth space to keep proving day by day that he could be the man she and their children deserved. And so life took on a quiet rhythm. Nighttime feedings under the mansion's vaulted ceilings, squeals of newborn laughter in the morning, and guarded conversations in the afternoon. Donovan learned that fatherhood wasn't just a new label, it was an all-consuming transformative role. And Elizabeth, for all her heartbreak, found moments of solace watching Donovan cradle their infants, singing lullabies in a soft, unsteady voice she'd never heard from him before. Winter gradually yielded to spring, bringing fresh growth to Beauclair's gardens. Sunlight filtered through newly budded branches, and the estate's fountain sparkled under warmer skies. The twins reached 3 months old, their personalities beginning to blossom. Alexander was feisty, always squirming, while Amelia was calmer, observing the world with large, curious eyes. One afternoon, after putting the twins down for a nap, Donovan and Elizabeth found themselves alone in the mansion's reading room. The subdued light cast gentle shadows on the library shelves. It was the first time in weeks they'd had a private moment uninterrupted by crying babies or house staff. Elizabeth studied Donovan for a long moment. "I've seen a change in you," she said quietly. He felt his chest tighten. "I've never been more serious about anything. These months with the twins with you, they've shown me what really matters." Elizabeth pressed her lips together, tears threatening to surface. "I don't trust you fully yet," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I see you trying, and I care that our children have a real family." Donovan reached for her hand. She allowed him to take it this time, though her grip was tentative. "I love you," he said with fervor. "I always have in my own flawed way." She closed her eyes, letting tears slip through. In that vulnerable moment, Elizabeth acknowledged that despite the immense pain Donovan had caused, she still loved him too. Love wasn't a neat equation. It was messy, painful, beautiful, and worth fighting for sometimes. No magical instant of absolute forgiveness followed. Instead, they shared a deep trembling embrace. Perhaps it was the start of building anew, or maybe a final farewell. But for that moment, it was enough to close the distance that had been tearing them apart. Over time, marriage counseling sessions were arranged. Trust exercises, honest conversations, and raw confessions filled many evenings. Donovan penned a heartfelt letter to Elizabeth, acknowledging every lie and vow he had broken. Elizabeth read it through tears, then wrote a response describing her own fears and disappointments. Though the future remained uncertain, both were willing to try. For the sake of the twins, for the sake of their own hearts, they forged ahead, cautious, hopeful, and forever changed. Months passed gradually, healing old wounds, though scars lingered. Donovan and Elizabeth decided to continue living at Beauclair, turning it into a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. The staff treated Donovan with polite reserve, aware of the rift in the household, but also noticing the genuine effort he invested in fatherhood. Serena Quinn drifted to the periphery of their lives. She launched a small cosmetics brand online, capitalizing on her short-lived tabloid fame, but her presence receded from major headlines. Donovan never reached out to her, and she, sensing no benefit to further contact, eventually moved on to new opportunities. Rumors linked her to an international art dealer, but the story never garnered much attention. In time, the media found fresh scandals to chase. Donovan's public persona stabilized as he demonstrated consistent leadership in his company, all the while making philanthropic gestures, no doubt influenced by Elizabeth's passions. Some cynics claimed he was simply buying redemption, but those closer to him sensed that fatherhood and near loss had sparked a more meaningful shift. Elizabeth remained cautious. Though she allowed Donovan back into her bed, she set firm boundaries about honesty and transparency. She demanded and received proof of Donovan's finances, phone records, and schedules. Some nights, guilt gnawed at Donovan. He realized how easily he used to lie and manipulate. Now each day of truth felt like a small victory. In the hush of dawn, Donovan often rose to check on Alexander and Amelia. He found solace in their innocent breathing, their tiny bodies nestled securely in cribs. As he watched them, he whispered apologies for his past and promises for their future. Each promise was a vow to be better, a father they could respect, a husband Elizabeth could count on. Exactly 1 year after Donovan's fateful return to Beauclair, with Serena in tow, Elizabeth woke before sunrise. She gazed at Donovan sleeping beside her, his hair disheveled, his face peaceful in slumber. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the twins' nursery. Sunlight broke over the horizon, illuminating Alexander's curious expression and Amelia's gentle coos. Elizabeth scooped them into her arms, one on each hip, and felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. Shortly after, Donovan entered, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he said softly, placing a tender kiss on each baby's forehead. Then he looked at Elizabeth, searching her face for signs of acceptance. She offered a small smile. The tension that once gripped their every interaction had eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. They carried the twins downstairs to the breakfast table, where the staff prepared a light meal. Over coffee and pureed fruit for the babies, Elizabeth cleared her throat. "I have an announcement," she said, drawing Donovan's full attention. "I'm ready to give us a real chance. No more guest suite, no more half measures. But Donovan, if you ever betray me again, that's it. We're done." He felt the air rush from his lungs, relief washing over him. "I won't. I promise." He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. Their eyes locked in a moment of unspoken agreement. Months of therapy, raw conversations, and unwavering devotion to their children had led them here, still bruised but willing to live as a unified family. The rebuilding process had been painstaking each day, a test of Donovan's sincerity and Elizabeth's capacity for forgiveness. In that single instant, they both chose hope over resentment, a future over a fractured past. From the brink of a devastating split to a fragile but genuine renewal, Donovan and Elizabeth's journey reminds us that no life is beyond repair, even in the face of betrayal, heartbreak, and public scandal. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in pain and regret, but it's how we grow from them that truly defines our story. Through newborn cries and sleepless nights, they discovered a new depth of love and unity, proving that second chances, while never guaranteed, can blossom if nurtured with honesty and perseverance. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the power of forgiveness, the complexity of desire, or the resilience of family, please share it with someone who might need the message. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories that shine a light on the raw, dramatic twists of life. After all, every life holds a chapter that can inspire someone else's healing.